I'm Allie. I came out after 20 years of marriage and I have 3 kids.
I'm Melissa and I have 2 kids and I came out at 37 after an 11-year marriage.
This podcast is about coming out later and the struggles and victories that come with it.
When coming out feels like the end of the world, but it's really just the beginning.
This is the Lesbian Chronicles. Welcome to the Lesbian Chronicles, where Melissa has a new hat.
I do. This hat I felt a little apprehensive about when I first bought it because it's a flat brimmed hat.
Yeah.
But it's growing on me.
Yeah.
I think my issue was, if you remember, I tried it on when we were at the lake and I was like, I look silly. I think it looks silly with my hair pulled back, but with my hair down, it looks pretty good. So,
I think it looks great.
but the funny thing is this logo, this Burton snowboard logo.
Yeah. You're sponsored now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sponsored. I met the woman who designed the logo when I was in Denver.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes it even cooler.
I know. I stopped by her tent and I was looking at her graphic design stuff, her stickers and all this stuff. And she was like, I actually designed that hat for Burton. And I was like, what?
Damn.
It's so cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I can't imagine getting that gig.
Yeah, I know, right?
I saw this.
Apparently she's like a freelance artist or something. So it's pretty cool.
I was thinking about being sponsored. I saw this meme yesterday that was like, basically, can someone have like regular people do the Olympic act first, like do the Olympic sport first, so we can really see how good these people are? And it was making me think about every time we watch like anything hard. This happened at the Nutcracker. It happened when we were watching skiing in the Olympics. Tatum will be like, I just feel like I could probably do it. Like, I think I could do that. And like, literally, I mean, at the Nutcracker, she's like, I know I could do that. I know I could.
Oh my
God. I want to do it. And so
I love the confidence.
I know. But anyway, so yeah, I guess you're sponsored now.
100%.
Yep. Well, so Denver Pride, how was it?
It was great. I had a blast. We hit up Blush and Blue, the lesbian bar there, on 2 different nights. The owner there is just so sweet, and so is her wife.
Very cool.
I really want to have them on eventually. And then we also went to a party. I think the sponsor of it was Mile High Pride. I apologize if I'm not getting that right, but it was like a lesbian day party. And what was funny was like the first night we were there, we are kind of just like, where is everybody? Like, it's kind of dead. We walk into this party, it was like a sea of lesbians.
Really?
Yeah.
Young,
and
like
everybody
Atlanta,
was really cool.
Young or
What's
old?
up?
Young or old?
It was more on the younger side, that crowd, but at Blush and Blue, it was more like our age kind of people. But yeah, the festival was really cool too. Lots of different booths, lots of, I don't know how many stickers. That was kind of my like go-to on this trip because my suitcase was so packed full because I had to pack like 6 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
To go with all my outfits.
Oh my God.
And we went hiking too. We did a hike at Red Rocks Amphitheater.
Oh, that's cool.
Just a little trail around there, and had lunch. There's a restaurant up at the top of the amphitheater steps. Had lunch up there. It was a really good weekend.
Yeah, I liked, and everyone you went with is super fun and easy.
Yeah,
so
it was a good vibe. Everybody was cool. So
that's amazing. Well, I want to introduce our guest that I'm super excited about because it's a topic that makes me really anxious, but also I like talking about it. So, Danie Bergstrom is a sexologist, and I saw her, we emailed back and forth, and I just felt like she would be an amazing guest because she focuses on lesbian sex. So I think that's right, isn't it, Danie?
Yeah, lesbians, any Saphics.
Okay, so welcome to the show, Danie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I actually live in Denver. I don't know if you guys know
Oh,
that.
wow. Oh, my God. You could have met Melissa.
Year, yeah, you should let me know
Dang.
when you're in town.
Oh my God. Were you at any of the same places over this past weekend?
No, so this year I stayed in and cooked some recipes and had a very low-key pride, but usually I do go out.
I mean, good call because it was blazing hot outside.
I know a lot of people who got sunburnt.
Yeah, we were good about sunscreen. And what was funny was like I was walking, I had put it on before we left, and I'm walking around the festival, and I'm like, God, I feel like I need more sunscreen because I feel like I'm on like the surface of the sun.
Yeah.
And like right as I said that, I look over and this guy's standing there just like spraying people randomly, like with his tent. They just had tons of sunscreen.
Amazing.
So it's like
Yeah.
divine intervention right here.
I know,
I
that's
actually
smart
have an
though.
umbrella that I carry around because the sunscreen doesn't do it for
Hmm.
me and my pale skin.
Yeah, a couple friends of mine bought umbrellas as well, like while we were there because I mean, it was just blazing. So,
Wow.
but yeah, good vibe there for sure.
Absolutely. I love it here.
How long have you been there, Danny?
About 4 years now, I think.
Okay. So you didn't grow up there.
No, I grew up in Missouri. You
Okay.
could probably guess why I left Missouri as a gay person. So,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can only imagine. Well, I want to hear
yeah.
how you got to be a sexologist.
Yeah. So it's kind of like any story where it starts with your own issues, and then once you figure it out, you're like, I have to tell everybody
Yeah,
about this.
for sure.
Yeah. So I grew up in Missouri. I married a man when I was 18. I
Oh wow,
was
that's young.
Young,
yeah, I was
yeah.
super religious. So that's kind of the funnel that you go into as a very religious person in the Midwest. Um, and then I once I left that religion, I was still in the marriage and I was like, oh, for sure not straight, but bisexual, obviously, because I'm married to a man. So I kind of thought that I at least had to like men because the compulsory heterosexual nature
Right.
of society. I'm like, I have to like them, obviously,
Of
but I also
course.
like girls. That was not the case. He was my best friend. And once I realized that I was gay, I was super happy with my first girlfriend, but the sex was it was good, but I was so nervous that I couldn't even relax enough to orgasm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so she thought it was her, and I'm like, no, 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 I think it's just me. And then also I would find myself like wanting to try these positions. I'm like, no, that's weird. That's she's gonna think that's weird, like if I try to do that. So I was just so in my head, and I was like, I'm finally like with a woman. This is my literal dream, but I cannot let go and enjoy the sex that I like. My body likes it, but I just cannot enjoy the moment.
Yeah. That sounds
So
so
I went on
familiar.
my, yeah, I went on my own journey of trying to figure out like, is it me? Am I not really gay? Like I had all these doubts, but I really was just there was so much religious shame and internalized homophobia that was really just blocking me. So once I finally figured that out, I was like, okay, more queer people need to know this because I know that I'm not the only person feeling this way.
What were you doing to figure it out? Like what was part of that quest to like get to the bottom of this?
Yeah, so I went to Google and Reddit,
Yep.
obviously, a lot of late
Obviously.
night panic Googling.
Yep.
Um, but I eventually found my way into the idea of somatic healing, which is body-based, nervous system-based, not so much like logic, reasoning, cognitive. So it was more like bringing the body to it. And so I kind of got interested in that from like an emotional perspective because I realized I had some trouble feeling my emotions. So that was supposed to help. And then once I did get in touch with like with my feelings, then I started noticing that I had some sexual hangups. Like now that I could feel my body because I was kind of numbed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the numbness was basically like from my belly button to like my kneecap. There was this area, and I was like, "That's weird." Like I can't even.
And
It felt
nothing.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt different than the rest of my body. So since the somatic body-based approach was working for me in other areas, I was like, oh, somatic sex coach. Like I was Googling and yeah, I found someone that I could work with. I learned where they got trained. I was like, I have to do this too. Give me this program. So that's
How
kind of the
long
short
does that
version.
take? Like you go to the place and then is it like a year later you start to be like, "Oh wait, I am better. Like this is easier." Like how is it like you're little by little noticing that okay, this is starting to feel a little better?
Yeah, it was definitely little by little. Even with the first session, we were doing a bit of breath work and she asked me to try to breathe into my pelvis. And I noticed that it felt like there was this cigarette tar black goop. Like I just had this image come to my mind,
Yeah.
which I know sounds kind of weird, but
No.
I was like, oh, I don't know it. I feel disgust right now. So even the first
Mm.
session, I was like illuminated to why I had all these blocks. Like my body was like, ew, gross, bad.
Yeah. And what did she say?
She was like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Let's, yeah, like not judging it, but she was
Yeah.
basically just like, okay, you have this new awareness. We're not going to force into it, but we're just going to know it's there and we're going to shift our attention. So I didn't get too like overwhelmed or judgmental
In
or
your
like
head.
in my head about like, oh no, I need to fix this right now.
Yeah. And then are you telling your partner, like, are you going home and being like, this is what happened today? Or or are you like, how does that work when you're in a relationship?
Yeah, so at first I felt kind of embarrassed to talk about it
Yeah,
because there's this idea that you're just supposed to know what to do in sex and you're just supposed to be great at it.
right.
So I kind of felt embarrassed that I was seeking help for this thing
Yeah,
that I'm supposed to know how to do.
right.
But
And was she
eventually, like,
always gay? Like, was she always like, she had been doing this forever, so it was just not a thing for her?
so she was in and out of the closet throughout middle school, high school, would get bullied, go back in the
Uh,
closet, come out. Her parents would belittle her, she'd go back. So once I started talking about my experiences, she was like, I kind of think I have that too. I think that maybe I think I'm blocked up in this area too. So it brought us closer and it's super normalizing to be like, oh, I'm not a freak.
yeah, totally. Because we've had guests on that we've talked about like you're in this intimate moment and it's going on, and then you're like, God, it's taking forever. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm getting more
Yeah.
anxious, and then it makes it worse. And then you're like
Yeah.
taking the blame for it. Like, it's not you. And then it just becomes, it's the moment is ruined
Yeah. And
because
then there's
it's,
this weird guilt. And then it's like,
yeah. And then you're like
ugh.
laying there, like, I don't know what to do. Yeah. So it's good for people to know that there's hope after that, you know? We,
Yeah. I had never even heard of a sex coach or a sexologist. So I was just kind of at my wit's end Googling and I just found this person. I was like, okay, of course, there's a profession for everything.
I like that that's another tool because one tool that we talk about a lot is a book called Come As You Are. Do you know that book?
Love that book.
Love that
Yes,
book. Yeah.
absolutely.
So I've read it twice. I have a lot of breaks. So I, like you, went out seeking like, what's wrong with me? Like I'm
Yeah.
finally doing this thing that I've always wanted to do and I can't really fully enjoy it because I'm so in my head.
Yeah.
But that felt like the brakes and the accelerators. That was the only real thing I found. So I'm interested, like there's these other tools, it sounds like.
Yeah, so there is very little information. Once I found that book, I was like, wow,
Yeah,
there's science on this. Like, I'm
right,
not weird. Other people experience this.
right. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
How much of it do you feel is a lot of like that internalized homophobia, the religious kind of upbringing, like that really contributes to that stuff?
For me, it was definitely a nice chunk of it. And I find that for a lot of people, even if they're not raised religious, we still are in like a puritanical culture here in
Yeah,
America,
we really
especially.
are.
So there's still the idea that sex is dirty, don't like it too much, but you have to be really good at it. There's still these confusing messages that affect people no matter like what religious background they came from.
It's so
Yeah, I
true.
mean, I didn't come from a religious background, like minorly though, like more so of like the environment, the world that I was raised in, growing up in the South. But
Yeah.
I do remember when I was like first being intimate with a woman, and it was like so exciting, and like I enjoyed it in those moments. But if I thought about it, like the next day, I would get this like pang of guilt in my
Yes.
stomach over it, and that went on for like probably a good year before it kind of I guess I just got more okay with it within myself. But it was such a weird feeling. I was like, God, what is that? Because I never experienced that with sex with men.
Yeah.
But I also remember being like, when I got engaged to my husband, feeling like, whew, like God won't judge me now, like that kind of thing. And I'm like, God, I wasn't even raised to think like this, but it's still like in me to think that way.
Yeah.
Culturally. Yeah. Even now, like as progressive as we are, and I've got 3 kids, 2 of which are old enough to have sex. It's still like as open as I am, and they tell me everything. There's still this thing where it's like, oh, women aren't supposed to have a lot of like you're a slut or you're a
Yeah.
like. There's all these messages even now, like in this day and age. So it is like, of course, 20 years ago, it was all we thought about was hiding it. It's taboo. It's horrible. Like that would be like maybe I was Catholic. I don't know what religion you were, but I would say sex before marriage is like one of the worst ones you can do.
Oh, yeah.
So what religion were you raised?
Jehovah's Witness.
Oh boy. Okay. That's probably even a
Oh,
step beyond.
Tad culty. Yeah.
jeez.
Does your
Man, I guess for those who don't know, like, because some people aren't familiar with what
yeah.
that religion is like, can you give us a little rundown?
Yeah, so they very fundamentalist. They would be classified as a doomsday cult, I would say,
The
because
doomsday cult.
they're counting down till the end of the world, which
Wow.
they're looking forward to. You don't socialize with people outside of the religion. So at school, I couldn't have quote unquote worldly friends, is what they called them, for fear of bad influence. And college was discouraged because it might open your mind to the devil.
Wow.
So it was very locked down with what you were allowed to take in, what kind of information or socializing you were allowed to do.
And isn't it, you don't celebrate your birthday
Right.
and Halloween, is that right?
No holidays. Yeah,
No holidays,
that's
period.
being too much like the rest of the world. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Even
Yeah.
like Christmas?
No, definitely not Christmas.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the 10-year-old in me that's like, how sad.
Wait,
What about
what?
Christmas? Now Christmas is my favorite, so we celebrate very
Oh.
hard at my house.
You gotta
So
make
how
out.
did you kind of branch away from that? Like
Yeah.
to me, it almost seems like leaving like Mormonism is another one that's hard to do. Like, how did you get out of that?
Because you didn't have any
Yeah,
friends outside if they kept you inside, locked
Yeah.
up.
right. Yeah, I have an ex-Mormon friend. We're really close because we do bond over this kind of thing. But yeah, so my husband at the time, we were 18, I was 18, and he started having questions about it and he would ask me like, "Hey, do you have an answer for this?" And I was like, "No, stop asking me questions. What are you talking about? Don't
Yeah.
question that."
Faith.
So he started kind of like wondering about it and he would ask me and I couldn't answer it, which made me feel like a little shaky, like why don't I have the answers to this? And then the final straw, we were at this meeting and there were a few head guys in New York that like write the literature and like kind of dispense the rules.
Yeah.
So this guy, he was on like a teleprompter in our church, and he was giving a speech about what we're not supposed to be doing. One of them, we weren't supposed to be wearing leggings because it's too tempting for men. So I was like, "That's dumb. I love leggings."
Oh,
And
not the
then
leggings.
right,
Yeah. That's
and
also
then
too tempting
the
for
next,
men. I mean,
yeah,
what? Get out of here.
I know. So that was in my head for a long
Yeah.
time. I'm like,
Check
"Ooh,
your
I'm tempting
boys.
people." Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So the final straw was right after that. He was talking about at the time, like slim fitting suits were really popular for men. I don't know, like 10 years ago now. So he was saying that the men who go to this church are not allowed to wear those tight fitting suits because homosexuals design them so that they can see your dick print in the pants.
What?
And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
and I just got up and like, we're leaving. Like, I'm done with this
Wait,
forever.
was your husband like, this is mind-bogglingly stupid? Or was he
Yes.
like, okay, he was too. Same camp.
Yeah. So I had been questioning, that was the final straw. I'm like, all right, we're done. And then we just walked out and never went back to.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
Did anyone
How did
follow
your
you?
family
Yeah.
deal with that?
Yeah.
So in that religion, if you leave the religion, you get shunned. So I am shunned.
Oh wow.
Even
Oh
mom, like your
gosh.
parents?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm so
Wow.
sorry. That sucks.
Yeah. That's a whole
Thank you.
nother episode of unpacking.
Right.
Yeah, it was 10 years ago, so it still hurts obviously, but the sting is not there and like I can sleep, it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt as bad with time.
Right. Well, you know you're on the
Yeah.
right side of history, so it's
Yeah,
easy to do
exactly.
that.
What's your life like today?
I love my life today. It's so much better. I actually just got married a month ago,
Oh,
Congrats.
so to a
yay.
woman, obviously. So we are very happy, and this work feels like I found my calling because I do a lot of people with religious shame or trauma are gravitate toward me, which makes sense because I have that
Been
too.
there.
So being able to tell someone like, hey, it gets better and you're not crazy for wanting to be yourself. Like there's nothing wrong with you. It's just such a beautiful thing to help other people with because at the time I literally thought that Satan was in my head, like convincing me. So
Yeah.
I couldn't even trust myself. So to have rebuilt that and then be able to like
Live
guide
it.
people a little bit too. Yeah, I love it.
Tell me, like, I am curious around, let's say somebody calls you up and they want to have an appointment with you. Walk me
Mhm.
through what happens.
Yeah, so I do free consultations about 30 minutes because I want to make sure that I can help the person, that what they're looking for, I can provide. Because since I do coaching. So if someone is in crisis or dealing with suicidal ideation, that's not my realm. That's a
Yeah.
therapist, a licensed therapist. So I always like to check in with them first. But if it's a good fit and we have our first session, the first session is honestly, I let them talk for as long as they want to. And I find that around this topic, most people haven't talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
So they have a lot to say.
Or are they shameful? Like, I'm thinking if I walked in to talk to you, I would be like dreading it to say it out loud.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah.
So how do they have a lot to say? Like, do they just like, what happens that they break the egg and it just starts happening?
Yeah. So usually sometimes I go first. So they'll, like with the questionnaire, if I know they're struggling with something, I'll be like, hey, I actually just had a problem with that last week, or this is how I dealt with it. It kind of de-shames them in the process. Like when I'm just sharing, like, I've gone through this too.
Right.
And then they're like, okay, I think I can talk about this. And then some people then just are able to just loosen up and talk. Other people, they'll say something and they're like, oh, sorry, that's probably too crude. Like they have this like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
And then I just encourage them, no, that's okay. I love that you feel comfortable with me. I love that you know what you like. There's nothing weird about that. So a lot of it is the first session is them trying to get them comfortable even talking about it with me.
Right. And then, so then they would come back like weekly? What happens? Like then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have this, the program that I do, I call it the Intimacy Lab, and it's 90 days.
Okay.
So it's a session a week. And from there, after the first session, we kind of break the ice because it's a very taboo, like
Totally.
cringy for some people topic, right? So once we break the ice, then my next step is I really want to get them aware of the different states of their nervous system. So a lot of people, we go through life and we're just acting and reacting, and we're not really aware of where it's coming from. So there are stress responses in the nervous system, and people's stress responses, there's fight, flight, freeze. You probably maybe heard of those, but it's kind of the way you react under stress. Okay. So the fight response, again, this is physiological, so you're not choosing this, but your body goes into a fight response that looks like being aggressive, yelling, confrontational. The flight response is maybe feeling that urge to run away or leave. And the freeze response is more like a shutdown. Like maybe you're in an argument and you just leave the room. You're just like stuck there.
Yep.
So a lot of people have these stress responses in relation to sex and intimacy.
Interesting.
So yeah, so I like to start kind of connecting the dots with them, because I notice that a lot of people blame themselves for how they react during sex. Maybe they shut down or dissociate, or they avoid it, or it makes them like anxious. I like to show them
like the fight response during sex. Would that be like you're blaming yourself, or you're fighting with your partner? Like, is it really like that? How would that look in a sexual situation?
Yeah. So sometimes for me, when my fight response would kick in, it was that feeling of like, I want them off me. I want them off now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would like end it, and sometimes I would just sit there and I would go into a freeze and just continue to let it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then sometimes the fight response too keeps people from having sex, right? Maybe it's initiated and they're like, no, that's stupid. Like, I'm not in the mood. How dare you?
Like you don't even get to that point.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because I feel like that's kind of like how I felt when I was married to a man. Like,
yeah,
it was very much like if he came up and hugged me and he's just being sweet,
right.
like as any partner would, I'm in the kitchen, he comes up behind me and hugs me, and I would freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely be like, what does this mean? Like, what is this going to lead to
later? Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, what is this hug making me commit to later?
Yeah.
And that's where my brain would go. And it's like, God, like how wild is that? I'm making that jump. But I don't feel that jump when I'm with women. Like I've never felt like that with a female partner, like I'm embracing it. But with a man, I was like, get me out of here,
Yeah, exactly. And I had that experience too. And so in my head, I'm like, am I a sociopath? Why am I not enjoying him hugging me? But my body was like, This is
Hmm.
stress. This is a stress response. But if I don't know that, I think I'm doom Googling, thinking that there's something wrong with me. When my physiology is making a millisecond snap choice that I'm not in control of, but I can be aware of it.
Yeah. It took me a very long time to like make that connection too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, years I experienced that, and it never struck me as like something I should dive deeper on, um, which
It's
I should
also
have.
like a Pavlov's dog. Like you're once it happens so many times, your body probably naturally just expects this repulsion, so you
Yeah.
automatically like go into that feeling. But I would say, like, or Danie, would you say, is it normal even in, like, even in Melissa's, she's out, she's gay, she's having sex with women. I would say
Well,
you're
not
not,
currently.
not currently, but you can, I'm sure it can happen even when you're happy and in love and in a great situation. Sometimes it's just like not happening and for whatever reason, and it's still anxiety inducing.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, this is not just you were in the wrong, like with the wrong gender that your body didn't want. Intimacy can trigger a stress response for so many reasons, even when you love the person. It's not really about love. Sex and love are different, and
Yeah.
talking about sex and having good sex takes different skills than having a good, loving relationship. So I talk to a lot of people like, I love my partner. She's the best. I want to marry her, but the sex is bad. Or like, the sex is not, we're not
Yeah.
having it.
Right.
And so those things can coexist. And when the intimacy can trigger a stress response in a loving relationship for a lot of reasons. And one of them, like you were talking about, Melissa, is when physical touch usually happens when it leads to something else. So I also find that a lot of people, their partner is like touchy, lovey, hugging on them, grabbing their butt when they're expecting sex and no other time. So automatically they get their back touched and they're like, oh, I don't want to have sex right now. What do you, no, nah,
Yeah.
right? And it can trigger
Yeah,
that freeze response. And it's, it's not because they don't love the person, but in that relationship, that the other partner is accidentally conditioning them to think that a physical touch always means sex.
And
that's
so then
interesting.
that is interesting. So then what's the work? Like for them, it's more about maybe the partner using physical touch, not just in those situations, I guess, like more universally.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would tell them is the partner that's initiating sex with touching, I would encourage them to touch their partner outside of a sexual situation and don't just make it sexual touch. Don't just go honk your boobs all the time and think it's funny, right? A lot of people, they don't like that. So make the touch more loving, more romantic, if that's what your partner wants, which in a lot of cases it is. And make the touch outside of expecting sex because you want to condition your partner's nervous system to not associate touch with needing sex because that's stressful. We're not always ready or willing or in the
Yeah.
mood for sex just because we get touched, but we might want physical closeness.
That is one thing that I tell partners is like, don't like do the sexual like poking kind of messing around stuff. Like, don't like poke me in the butt or whatever. Like, it's annoying to me. Like
Yeah,
that reminds me of just like being in middle school, you know, and the kid's like tripping you in the hall because he likes you. Like,
totally.
it's kind of like no, because it makes you recoil, you know? And so then when they do go to actually like intimately touch you, you're like, ugh, get
Yeah.
away. You
Yeah,
know, is this real? Or are you gonna like suddenly poke me in the butt again?
right. Yeah.
Is it ever just bad? Like, do you ever have clients though where you're like, yeah, it's just chemically or for whatever reason, you guys are just not a good sexual match?
Yeah.
Really?
Sometimes that happens. Yeah.
Okay. And then do you have to
So
tell them that?
so I don't ever give advice like that,
Okay.
but I do my purpose there is to show them the menu of options. That whether that's the kind of sex they can have with themselves, their partner, what their body can feel if they've been numbed out. I'm trying to widen their menu of options so they don't feel like they only have this one thing and that's the only thing they can do. So if these people, two people, have put in the work to try to understand what each other wants and teach each other and communicate, that often solves a lot of the sexual mismatch. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you two are just fundamentally different and you don't want to put in all the work it would take every time to try to match your sexual desire. And that's okay too.
And then is it like, okay, you're not going to be together? Or is it like stay together and it's just going to be not great? And like, how does it normally end up shaking out?
Yeah, so sometimes the people are together, they like maybe the home that they've built, or if they have a family, they like that co-partner aspect, and
Yeah.
then they have an open relationship and they have sex elsewhere. Or sometimes they break up and they just go their separate ways. Another option I always introduce, which is sometimes edgy for people, but if you want to stay together and you both have tried and can't meet each other's sexual needs, you can hire a sex worker. You can hire out. There are professionals who do this. So I like to give them a wide range of options and see what makes sense for them. And it's not up to me.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about lesbian bed death?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this topic. Because when I first came out and I heard about it, I was like, of course, back to Google, like, oh no, I finally am out.
Am I doomed?
Yeah, am I doomed? Because this is kind of fun. I don't want it to be over. So the origin of this idea, it was this one study done in the 1980s. And the question was asked, how many times a week do you perform sexual acts? I think was how it was phrased. And the lesbian group reported the least amount. I think it was per week. And so then this idea snowballed. The first thing I want to say is that I think, especially in the 80s, but even now, we are conditioned to think that penetrative sex counts as sex and nothing else does. And a lot of lesbians do a lot more than just penetration. And so one of the options that I think accounted for this reporting in this one singular study was that they weren't counting what they do as quote unquote sex because it's not penetrative.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's just a theory. I can't prove that. But the other problem I have with this idea, that to clarify, it's the idea that lesbians in long-term relationships have less sex than any other group. And any relationship will have a decline in sexual desire because the hormones change. Falling in love feels a lot different than 5 years down the road. And we can't change that. So once the hormones kind of level out, we have to be an active participant in creating sexual desire in our relationship. And that goes across the board no matter your orientation. So those are the caveats I like to say. But with that being said, as someone who primarily works with lesbians and queer women, I have noticed there are certain intimacy blocks that affect lesbians more than other couples. Other couples have their own blocks, but lesbians have specific struggles that I find get in between their erotic connection.
Like what? Like lack of connection, or like what would some of those blocks be?
Yeah, so the main one that I like to talk about is just the socialization of women. So first of all, women are socialized not to want sex, right? Men are socialized, it's okay for you to want sex, you should be the pursuer, you should always like be after it, be in the mood.
Yeah.
Women don't get those messages. And I don't believe it's a biological thing, I believe it's a cultural thing. So like we were talking about with the religious shame, no matter how you were raised, religious or not, we're told that women don't like sex very much. They kind of just
put up with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed like 3 different archetypes that come from socialization that show up in women or AFAB people. And the main one that I find in my clients is the caretaker. You all may be familiar with this in your own life or yourselves. I definitely can have caretaker tendencies. So that means that I am worried about how the other person is doing. I am going out of my way to check on them, to help them, to comfort them. I'm outwardly focused on this other person, trying to make sure that they're comfortable while I'm ignoring my own needs. That's going to build resentment. And resentment is the number one thing that comes between people who had a sexual connection, now they don't.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And maybe along with the anxiety you're feeling about the sex in general, it's like you are really worried about them because you don't want to focus on the fact that you're not able to enjoy it. So it's like even more so caretaking them.
Yeah, the caretaking is out of the bedroom and it goes into the bedroom.
Yeah.
Because I find that whatever struggles you're having in the bedroom, I can see it outside the bedroom, and it trickles inward. So it's happening throughout the relationship, and sex is just the area that maybe is bothering the person the most that they seek help. But it's happening, the caretaking happens everywhere.
Isn't there another study that says like it's kind of like the opposite of lesbian bed death, where it says that lesbians actually have the most satisfying sex, I think?
Yeah, so they have more orgasms, and I believe, as my experience, we don't just focus on penetration, right? We explore the clit, we explore different areas, we find different areas to rub our bodies on, we touch differently. We have the menu that's presented to us is more broad than presented to a straight couple, which is P and V, and that's sex, and that's what we need to do. So lesbians are they have a more expansive menu, and so they're going to have more orgasms because they're not just focused on putting something in a place. That's not the only sex.
And that's interesting too about what you said with this study. I didn't realize that it was like done in the 80s, and like the question, how it was posed and all that stuff. And I would also imagine that in the 80s, if I was a lesbian in the 80s, I'd be like afraid to even answer the question.
Talk about anxiety. Yeah.
Like, is this going to get me like in trouble?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So it's really built on all these. It's a dumb study the way it was worded, and it was in the 80s. There's all these layers that are like, there's no basis to this. But when lesbians do stop having sex, like, oh, lesbian bed death is real. Like, well, did you work through the anti-sex socialization that you received as a woman? Probably not.
Danie, how can people find you? And do you only do your work in Denver, or can people only reach out to you if they live in the local area?
No, so I do in-person coaching in Denver, but I also do online worldwide. So,
excellent.
Yeah, my website is saphicsexologist.com.
Okay.
And I exclusively work with lesbians and queer women.
Excellent. Okay.
That's very cool.
Yeah, we'll post it on our socials, but thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, this is really eye-opening. Yeah, so. And sure. I love the lesbian bed death myth being busted. So
yes, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Please pass it along to your friends that it is not real.
We definitely will. Thanks, Danie.
All right. Thank you, Danie.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Want to support the Lesbian Chronicles podcast? Rate us and write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
We love listener feedback. If you'd like to share your story, email us at melissaandallie@gmail.com. That's Melissa, MELISA, and Allie, ALLI, @gmail.com. Or follow us on Instagram at Lesbian Chronicles.